Senate recently passed a $115 million funding package to improve the pathway to home ownership, increase affordable housing, and provide an off-ramp for the eviction moratorium. Senator Rich Draheim, chair of the Senate Housing Committee, joined me to talk about the housing omnibus bill. Issues surrounding home ownership and home affordability have really moved to the forefront over the last couple years. Anecdotally, on the floor, you mentioned members' children and grandchildren struggling to find that first home. Housing used to be a part of another committee. Now it stands alone, and more money than, as is usual, $115 million would go towards housing in your funding package. How did we get so far behind on housing?
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the good question. We haven't focused on the end goal, in my opinion. And the end goal, if we really want to help people, is home ownership. Owning a home is cheaper than rent in most cases, and that should be our goal. Is what can we do to get people educated, get them on a career path job, and then a pathway to home ownership. And I've been a broken record about all the benefits about home ownership in the 5 years I've been up here in St. Paul, and I think it's a great equalizer.
You believe, as you just said, that homeownership should be the end goal of housing policy. This funding package is a move in that direction. How does this package make progress toward home ownership?
Well, we do some various things. Over the last 5 years, we've put a focus on home ownership, different types, from senior housing to manufactured housing and workforce housing. And, I think we focus on the end goal on that, and then we focus on some new programs with our state money to focus on that end goal instead of just more apartments. And when we build apartments, we build very expensive apartments that cost 2 or 3 plus more than the open market would cost to build. And then we might do a infrastructure, we might do a tax TIF, and then we finance the program, and then we give them a tax credit on the backside, and then we just go and pay the rent for people. So I think there are different things we can be doing for housing, and rental's still important. So I'm not a guy that says we shouldn't do any rental. We still do rental. We still need to do a lot of rental. But I think we also need to focus on the other end.
Well, and this bill does have $1.6 million in a workforce home ownership program. And there's also some money for home ownership education. How would that work?
So we have the agency works with nonprofits throughout the state to help educate people on, what is the pathway to a home ownership. And I think some of us, or a lot of us, take it for granted because we grew up in a home, and other people haven't. They haven't had that generational home ownership. I think my parents' first house was $14,000. Interest rates were through the roof, but it was very affordable for a used house. And today you're looking at probably $240 for the average home throughout the whole state for an older home. So we need to get people so they understand the benefits of home ownership. And I think that what we call HECAT, or the education piece of what our state agency does, is very important.
Now, you also mentioned on the floor that Minnesota has one of the worst home ownership gaps in the country between white people and African Americans in particular, but also people of color. How can Minnesota begin to close this gap, especially when there's a shortage of starter homes?
It's going to be tough, and I think part of it is we need to focus on that, and that's what we're trying to do. And as a state overall, we're in the bottom of the pack, not the worst. But when we break apart Minneapolis is considered to be the worst in the whole country, and that's sad because that means there's a lot of families that don't have the opportunity to better themselves. And you look at the net worth of a family that rents versus a family that owns a home, it's night and day difference. And so if we really want to help people, we should help them get into some kind of home ownership. and not just single family homes, but other forms also.
One measure in the bill that seems to have caused a little bit of controversy revolves around developments that have aesthetic mandates that exceed existing zoning requirements. You said that you hope to encourage cities to do the right thing. Is there an attitude of not in my backyard that is stymieing efforts to increase affordable rentals and housing?
Yes, I think there's a really big pushback for NIMBY, is what we call it. And that's too bad. And all we're trying to do is encourage the cities to have a section of their town where they have more affordable housing options, and not trying to push any mandates on them that they have to do X, Y, Z or so much per population or block or anything like that. But they need to do the right thing. And if they don't do the right thing, they're just going to come to us and ask for funding for more of these apartment buildings that, like I said, cost 2, 3, 4 times as much as a normal housing or apartment building would cost. As far as the aesthetics, we already have it in statute that cities aren't supposed to require anything above and beyond the building code. So if it isn't in the building code, so if it doesn't, building code is supposed to be about safety and energy, the look of a house doesn't really apply. Now, as a homeowner or as a developer, I can decide what I want to put on the appearance of my house. And that's the way it should be. It should be up from the individual. I don't want to be told what color I have to paint my house, or I have to put brick on the front. So that's what we're trying to get through.
This package provides an off-ramp to the eviction moratorium that was put in place at the beginning of the pandemic. What are some of the key points that landlords and renters who are behind on their rent need to know?
Go to Rent Help MN. We have a great website set up, the state does, and we've been very fortunate to get a lot of federal funding to help people that are behind. You know, we can argue, should we do it or not? We have the money. We have the program set up, and we really can't get people to move on until they get squared. You know, my goal is to get everybody who wants to the opportunity to get a home ownership. But if you own a whole bunch of back rent, it's gonna be pretty hard for you to move on. So if you have any friends or family that are behind, or if you're behind, go to that Rent Help MN and apply. Work with your landlord and your property manager to get caught up. That off-ramp bill we worked really hard on, and bipartisan support, and it had some language in there that was very tough for the other side of the aisle to vote for, and that was restricting future executive orders for this chapter law that has to do with rental. But we still got a super majority vote off of the floor to move forward. So I think we're in a real good position moving in to have that conversation with the House. But I think that's up to 42 states have already done something. 42 states. So we're one of the outliers. And it's unfortunate, but I get the feeling that the state agency doesn't want to have an off-ramp. And they've been dragging their feet on this. And it's something that we need to get done and get that off-ramp passed in both bodies.
And just quickly before we go, there is a ban in the bill on municipalities from enacting rent control. Why is that?
You know, rent control is probably the most studied aspect of housing. And it's something that came up when I was in college as an example of what not to do. And that was a while ago. And you know, it's been studied by economists from every type of government all over the world. And it's absolutely the worst thing you can do if you're trying to encourage more housing units. And we have a 50,000 housing unit deficit in Minnesota. So 50,000 housing units. That's why rent is so high. That's part of the reason housing is so high. Right now we have lumber prices and some other factors going into that. But we need more units. That's the goal, more units.
Senator Rich Draheim, I'm going to have to stop you right there, but we can pick this up another time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.